Hey there, everyone. Thank you for joining this evening's webinar. This is our virtual meetup of the DC Distributed Health Blockchain Innovation Working Group. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Heather Flannery, your friendly organizer. If you're new to the meetup, love to talk to you, and thanks for joining. I'm excited. We have two guest speakers this evening from HealthWizz. Would like to have them each introduce themselves briefly. Raj, would you go first?
Sure. Raj Sharma, I'm the co-founder and CEO of HealthWizz, and HealthWizz is about a year old, and we are in healthcare and applying some new innovation technologies to healthcare.
Thank you. Delighted that you're here this evening. And Suresh?
Yeah, I'm Suresh Bajpai. I'm also a co-founder with Raj of HealthWizz, and I'm the CTO. And very excited to move our story, share our story today, and of course cite some of the times that are coming for us. Some very cutting edge innovations that we are trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. So delighted we have your business leader and technical leader here together, so we can look at the full gambit of business, financial, legal, technical, architectural, philosophical things this evening. A little bit before we get started about what to expect this evening. So for those of you who have not attended one of these events before, we're going to be handing the presentation over to Raj to do a 5 to 10 minute introduction to HealthWizz and the role of the Omcoin token that is in pre-sale today, and we're going to be discussing about that. When Raj is finished with the presentation, I'm going to come back on and we're going to go through a structured interview segment where we're going to be having a discussion between Raj and Suresh and myself, as well as running some polls of you, the audience. Then we're going to leave a substantive amount of time at the end for audience engagement and discussion with all of you. And it's going to work as follows. Please document your questions and feel free to do so as the event is occurring for questions that you'd like to ask. When we get to the Q&A segment, I'm going to be taking each of you off of mute one at a time, unless you indicate in your written question that you don't wish to be taken off of mute. And then you'll have an opportunity to have a discussion about your question with Raj and Suresh, and then we'll take you, put you back on mute, go to the next question, and so on. And that will be the process that we go through to cover the full range of questions that you might have on every aspect of this. Then in closing, I'll make some reminders about things that I've announced through this group about the increased concentration of webinars we're going to be doing in December and January. Looking forward to that. We've got some really exciting speakers lined up, just like Raj and Suresh, from a range of perspectives in blockchain and healthcare. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you. Are you able to see the HealthWizz presentation on your screen, Raj and Suresh?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I can.
Very good. So I'm going to hide my webcam and turn it over to you.
Okay. So Heather, we had this virtual webinar, I think it was 2 weeks back, when we had Cambria Insurance as a guest speaker. And I think at that time, Bitcoin was trading at $8,000. And now I'm looking at the Bitcoin price and it's above 14,000. So it kind of jumped $6,000 in 2 weeks. I think we should continue this gig. I think it's good for Bitcoin. If every 2 weeks it goes up by 6,000, I think we'll be very happy. So, with that, I brought up Bitcoin because it is a cryptocurrency. It's kind of the 100-pound gorilla in this space. And I think that's where it all started, quite frankly. And now we have literally 1,000 different cryptocurrencies in the market. And, HealthWizz has also announced that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But let me just give you a little bit of a background in terms of, why, when, where, and how it all started. So one of the things, a lot of times I give this example of my mom being admitted to the hospital in the emergency room. And they couldn't find anything wrong. They did a bunch of tests. They discharged her. When she came back home, she complained of acute pain, and then we had to take her back to the emergency room the next day in a different hospital, same town. And they repeated all the tests. And it was appalling, not only from a discomfort standpoint, but even just from sheer waste of money, right? All the tests were repeated. This is a pretty big problem. It's a $25 billion problem. All the duplicate scans and MRIs that are done just because the doctors don't have access to medical records when they need them. And in my mom's case, it was a simple matter of transferring medical records from one hospital to the other, and they were not able to do that in time for the second hospital to make use of those tests. Now, if you combine all the redundant blood tests and some of the other tests that are done, the problem actually becomes even larger. It goes from $25 billion to $200 billion. It's a pretty big problem. And the problem kind of is highlighted on this slide here. Our data is really scattered in silos all over the place, in hospitals, doctors' offices, labs, pharmacies. Of course, they are on paper records as well. And now we are generating even more data with our wearables. And when we order something from 23andMe or Ancestry.com, that's even more data about us. And of course, our health insurance company has data as well. So that's kind of the root of the problem that we are trying to address, is all this data residing in different silos. And what our vision is really, Heather, if you can go to the next slide, our vision is to really see every human being on the planet essentially carrying their complete, comprehensive, longitudinal record on their smartphones wherever they go. So even if they're traveling and there is an emergency, they can show their medical records and allergies and medication list to the doctor that they need care from. So essentially what we have done is created a comprehensive, really womb-to-tomb longitudinal health record that resides on the individual's phone. And this is really sort of unique to what we are doing, is we don't touch users' data, we don't see users' data. We think that the data should reside completely under the control of the user all the time. We think that about 10 gig of data is what you need to kind of store that longitudinal data. And if you need more data, if you need more space, you can always use your Google Drive or iCloud or something like that, or any other private cloud that you have. And we see this process sort of happening in 3 steps. So first is, the app has tools and facilities to help you aggregate your medical records from different silos. And then the second step is the app really organizes, normalizes, and standardizes this data. And we use this new standard called FHIR, Fast Health Interoperability Resources, so that you can use a set of standard APIs to access this data. So we have accomplished step 1. So today, if you download our app from the App Store, you can go to any patient portal. And by the way, every hospital in America, every doctor's office in America has a patient portal that you can log in and download your medical records. So that's what we facilitate with this app, right? And then the second step, and this is what we are in the middle of doing, is standardizing this data so it can be easily accessed using this new API, standard API called FHIR. And the third step is to really, make this data shareable using blockchain. Now, the key thing here is that we are not actually putting data on blockchain, but we make it accessible on blockchain. We don't think it is prudent to put the actual data on blockchain. But if we can make it accessible on blockchain, what we can do is have the data under user's control and then have it be shared with whoever wants that data for whatever reason, as long as the user agrees to that. So if it's a pharmaceutical company doing research, or if it's a research organization that is doing clinical trial, or any kind of personalized medicine that companies are developing, and they need data from the person. And by the way, the data that they need now, because of the genetic information that is available, only the user is in the best position to aggregate this data. because the user has access to clinical data, they have access to their genetic data, they have access to their lab reports, and they can bring it all together in one place, and that data becomes tremendously valuable for pharmaceutical companies, research organizations, as well as for clinical trials. So that's essentially what we want to do. Now, in order to make this data shareable and useful and valuable, we need to create a marketplace. And in any marketplace, you can create it by creating a network effect. And that's what essentially we are trying to do with with our application and platform. You have more data buyers. Well, first we start with users. So the more users you have, the more data you have, the more value the data has, especially if it is from different sources. The more data buyers come to this marketplace, and then again, the cycle gets completed because that attracts more users. So this is the marketplace that we are trying to create, and for that we have introduced this Omcoin. Now, after this, if you go to the next slide, Heather, this is an example of how consumers can actually start earning Omcoins, which is essentially a digital currency that you can earn by participating in challenges. So you can either sell your data, share your data, and earn Omcoins as a digital currency. Or the other example or use case is if you participate in a health-related challenge, for example, at work or with family members or your peers. If you say you're going to run a 5K race, and whoever finishes it in X amount of time earns 5 Omcoins, and you can actually set up a kitty amongst yourselves and participate in this health challenge. You can even have somebody validate the results. So you have the role of a participant, validator, and a moderator, and you have the sort of the formation of a challenge, and essentially all the rules of the challenge are really contracts that are executing on a blockchain. And as soon as the person gets validated that they have completed the 5K run, they get Omcoins in their wallets. So that's an example of how people might earn Omcoins through participating in a challenge, besides making the data available to for research. There is one more slide, Heather. I don't know if we passed that or not. Okay, this one. Yeah, so this one, completing the virtuous cycle. So this is a question that comes up a lot of times. It's not a one-way thing for users to participate in different things and just keep accumulating coins, Omcoins. We want them to start spending Omcoins on other health-related services. So, for example, we are talking to health clubs and see if health clubs would accept Omcoins as premium or as a membership fee for health clubs. We are talking to some insurance companies to see if the insurance companies would accept Omcoins as part of premium. Or for example, doctors' offices could accept Omcoins as copays, for instance. Or you may be able to buy Nike shoes or Under Armour sweatpants or Lululemon yoga mat for Omcoins. But that's really the market we want to create, and the cycle that happens in that market. So people earn either through because they sold their data, or because they participated in a challenge, they went and bought something. The merchant can then go and either buy these Omcoins from an exchange or from Health Wizz, and that essentially completes the virtuous cycle. So that's a high-level overview of what we're doing, and obviously we'll kind of go into some of the details as we interact more and as Heather asks more questions.
Thank you so much, Raj. What a fantastic overview and an inspiring vision. I think before we get into the interview segment, maybe we could have Suresh give a technology overview verbally about big picture architectural decisions that were made, maybe just a few minutes to get us started, and then we can kind of balance our subsequent questions between the business model innovation the market opportunities, the legalities, and the technical scaling and throughput and other design decisions that are either already made or being considered. Suresh?
Yeah, so the central vision of HealthWizz is to basically put the individual or the patient or the person who owns the data in direct custody of their own data, right? So we never wanted to be the custodian or the storage house of data itself. So that vision basically drove our key design decision, where we decided that the actual store of the data would either be the personal phone itself. So smartphones today have the capacity to do that, right? So we sort of estimated that from whom to whom the size of file resources an individual would generate would be the tune of 10 to 12 gigabytes. And that's well within the reach of today's smartphone, right?
For sure.
So that was the first choice. So that sort of puts HealthWizz as a company completely, out of the custody of your data. I mean, if you can collect your data and not even trust us, the platform provider, with the data. I mean, that's the level of ownership we wanted to give the individual. There are two more choices we wanted to give the users, so the users can actually use their personal cloud like Google Drive or OneDrive to store the same data, in which case, the data is accessible from any device, yet it's owned by you because it's on your drive, and again, we are totally out of the custody. There's no custodial responsibility on us. It's entirely your data. You are responsible for it. You maintain. We give you just the tools to maintain and aggregate it. And of course, the third option was that for a premium, for a small fee, we can provide you the space, rent out the space, in case you're not, you don't want to sort of consume your own smartphone space or your private drive space. So there are three choices as a design, as a central design we wanted to give the user. So that's about the storage of data, how the data will be stored. The second part of the story is, of course, how do you then, once you have this valuable storehouse of data which people want, right? It's a very, very, very valuable asset. It's an asset that people want to have a look into, either anonymously, pseudonymously, or even with identity, with your own identity attached to it. Then what's the vehicle for through which this thing can be traded? And we looked at a number of blockchain solutions, right? Private permission blockchains, public blockchains, mix of both. And ultimately decided that at this point of time, at least, public Ethereum blockchain with its smart contract capabilities is the best vehicle to trade this asset. So that's where we are doing our first smart contracts. We'll go there. In future, we do have plans to maybe look at other blockchain solutions. There are some very innovative solutions coming in the market. I mean, just before this webinar, I was looking at a network called IOTA. It's I don't know whether you have heard of it. It's the IOTA price has jumped fourfold, in the last 24 hours, because Microsoft and Apple are partnering with them. It looks like a very exciting platform for zero fee asset transfer. Just to give an example of what might lie in future, but as our first, couple of core technical decisions using use of public Ethereum, and I still think it's a very wise choice, and we are going ahead with it. The third key choice was, as Raj said, transferring data or storing data in the blockchain, it's sort of unfeasible from capacity point of view, from a transaction fee point of view. So we have a solution where the data remains with the user, and whenever they want to trade it or share it, we generate secure keys, and these keys becomes the vehicle by which a data seeker can go ahead and extract data from the store of the user. And the key, basically, these keys, access keys as we call them, basically dictate, when can the data be, accessed, by which frequency can it be accessed. There are time limits and instance limits on how many times you can access the data. And all these very fine-grained permissions can be coded into the keys, and these keys become the vehicle for data transfer. And again, the use of FHIR, FHIR resources, as the normalizing format. We believe that FHIR is going to become a standard. I think it's already become a standard. It's pretty widely adopted by the medical fraternity for interoperability of medical data. And our data stores, the normalization format will be FHIR. All the data will be accessible as FHIR resources, and so there is no extra learning curve to access the data. If you have a FHIR client, a data seeker, or the buyer is ready to access the data. So these are some key decisions we took early on. I think we have made good bets on it, and we are sort of going through with them.
All right, thank you for that technical introduction, Suresh. So many questions for both of you. My goodness, what an interesting use case or set of use cases that you've gone after with HealthWizz. Okay, so before we jump into the interview segment, I'd like to do one poll of the audience, and just so that you all know what's coming, we have 4 questions that we intend to ask you over the course of this evening. And we're going to start here. Launch poll. There we go. All right. So the question is, would you be willing to sell your medical records to a pharmaceutical company that focused on life-saving precision medicine? And there are character limitations to the question. So all of the complexities of the question we can't necessarily cover, but what we were thinking with this question was we're talking about for research purposes, and so we would like to get your answer before going into too much more detail on that. A couple of things in a moment after we have we're still collecting responses. 72% of you have voted. Keep going, keep going. We're almost there. Let's try to get it to 90% of you having clicked the poll. We're almost there. All right, almost. Oh, okay, and we hit 90%. Thanks, guys. What a really well participating audience. And now I'm going to share the results. So 63% of you said yes, you're willing to share. You're willing to sell your records for research purposes, and 38% said no. So I guess my first question for you, Raj, is what do you think of those results? Does that line up with your expectation? What do you think?
It's really interesting. I bet you the numbers are very influenced by demographics. So, for instance, if you were to take the same poll in perhaps an economically disadvantaged area, I would bet that more people would be willing to sell their medical records than in an area like this where just people don't see a need to do that, or because of privacy concerns. So I think it probably depends a lot on the demographics.
And I imagine that if instead of saying for life-saving precision medicine, if you said for disease state X and you were targeting a population who suffered from disease state X, or whose dear friends or family or parents have disease state X, that then skyrockets where they have both an intrinsic and an extrinsic motivator in your model.
Yeah, right.
Well, thanks, audience, for giving us that insight. So I'm going to direct my first couple questions at you, Raj, and then switch to you, Suresh. So Raj, first, from a business perspective, can you give a little bit of commentary on why you decided to use an ICO as your funding model for this big picture, and then a little bit of the highlights of the uses of proceeds that are intended, the amount that you're looking to raise, and yeah, let's start there.
Okay, so we actually don't call this an ICO, and this is sort of a little bit with the advice of our legal counsel, but also in the industry. Mm-hmm. ICOs are starting to get a little bit of a bad rap because there have been some, not so very successful ICOs. So we are really calling it a token sale as opposed to an initial coin offering or ICO. And actually, there is sort of a difference between the two. The reason why we decided to go this route is, number one, the token is a vehicle to certainly fund the company, but it is also a utility token in the sense that it is the token that is going to be used by the users of this network. And in fact, that's why from a legal standpoint, from a security and exchange standpoint, we don't call this token a security. It's actually a utility token. Now, who knows what's going to happen in the future, how the SEC is going to look at this in the future, but at this point, the lawyers think that we have a defensible position in the sense that, yes, people are buying this token, but they are buying it with an intent to use it on the network along with this HealthWizz app. So that's, and we think that in order to build what we want to build, it takes a lot of money, and I'll go into the details of how much we are going to raise. And it's really something that if we can get our the users as the investors into this project, this mechanism of a token sale works really well. And essentially that's what we are doing. So people who are going to be the users, our users are essentially investing in the company. And from a legal standpoint, it's not really investing either. It's really they're buying a piece of license or a piece of software so that they can use the app to to essentially accumulate tokens and then use them to buy other things.
So the key distinction in my mind with a token generating event and a utility token is that they're not purchased for the purpose of appreciation of the value of the asset.
Right.
You're not, it's not being promoted or purchased, ostensibly at least, for that purpose.
Exactly.
It's being purchased in order to subsequently use it in the construct of your specific application and the specific value chain that you're working with.
Exactly. So there are no dividends that are paid on this token. Right. There is no expectation that there is going to be profit generated with this token. Now, as a result of the marketplace being successful, if the value of the token goes up over time, that's great. But the intent is to really make this token really represents a contract and a piece of software, and that's what people are buying when they buy the token during the token sale. And so we actually have taken the whole fundraising process, and there are two parts to it. One is called the pre-sale, which is what we are doing right now. We announced it on November 30th. It will go on to thank you. It will go on it'll go on till February 15th. And so there we are raising just enough money to build out a prototype or a minimum viable product. So on February 15th, what we will demonstrate is with medical records, sending them to point B, which represents an enterprise, and then the enterprise sending Omcoin, which is our token that we are issuing, back to A. So essentially a transfer of medical records from point A to point B in return for Omcoins. And so that's the utility that we will demonstrate on February 15th. And then once we do that, we do our public token sale. Totally, we are going to raise $17.5 million. During the pre-sale, we will raise $2 million, which is enough to get us to showing a minimum viable product. And the public sale will raise $15.5 million. So that's the structure of the of the token sale. We are issuing a total of 1 billion Omcoins, out of which 650 million will be available for the sale, right? 25 is going to be given to or kept with the founders and the management team. And then another 10% will be kept in reserve for promoting the token, you know, as the utility gets built out. And so we are going to use the 10% or 100 million for promotion.
You get free tokens if you do this, or you participate in that challenge, or bonus tokens, things like that.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So that's the structure of the token that we are, or the token sale that we have constructed.
So question for you, Suresh, about the minimally viable product that's going to be funded out of the pre-sale proceeds. As you were describing, or the two of you respectively describing your vision, I imagine I'm not alone super interested in any mechanics you're going to be able to deliver from within your app to expedite delivering the consent and the request that is coming from the patient to an EHR controlled by a health system. So I'm imagining, you know, for example, from within your app. Now, granted, they could go download health records in other modalities, but your goal was to facilitate that and make it a much less painful process, which right now I would attest it is extremely painful. And once you get your data, it is not normalized. It is not necessarily usable in any setting. So could you speak a little bit to what you intend to do in the minimally viable product with that, and then maybe what a little bit of the downstream vision is in terms of next functions at that level of exactly how you would facilitate and make it simpler technically to get data out, trade the consent, etc.
So, you know, in the presentation, Raj gave that three-step process that we want to follow and for our vision. So in the MVP, in the minimal viable product, I think the first where you want to give the ability to the user to download and aggregate. And I think first and second are sort of interrelated. Once you have downloaded, the process of normalizing in file resources sort of will have to happen so that the data is shareable and accessible. So we want several sources to come into, you know, again, since your data is so fragmented all around the place, we have to make a bet on what are the most common places this data today resides on, right? So we want to sort of use paper records, you know, snap a picture from a smartphone, pass it through an OCR process, extract some data out of it, maybe gather some information from the user of what sort of a scan this is. So scanning of paper records, a lot of people get their medical records from their doctors through email, secure email, or even unsecure email today. So accessing attachments from your email as medical records. And of course, you know, if your EHR, if your provider has a prior EHR, then you know, storing access tokens to that EHR and then syncing data, your personal data from your EHR to your personal store at the frequency at which, you know, you decide. So these facilities of aggregating data we want to put into place by, you know, by the time we go to public sale. And then, as Raj said, you know, a simple demonstration where somebody can, you know, a data buyer, which probably we might act as our own data buyer for demo purposes, or if you can get a partner by then, you know, that would be icing on the cake. But somebody can create what we call a buying campaign. So the modality of buying and selling medical data is through a vehicle which we are calling buying campaigns. So somebody can create a campaign and invite participants into it, and our app facilitates this. As you said, you know, you basically accept an invitation into a campaign, and that invitation, you know, bundles all the consents that you need to give for sharing the data there. All the agreements that need to be in place are through this acceptance of an invitation to participate into a campaign. So all these mechanics will be there, in the MVP, where a simple campaign can be formulated and people can be invited to it, and then people, users accept the invitation and then share data, which is basically a smart contract to exchange value with access to your data.
So before you go on, I want to touch on something that you said a moment ago, where you were so much of in my world, in our company, we deal with pictures of pieces of paper at large scale, and you talked about running it through an OCR process, and it makes me hope that Zaraf is on the line and might ask some great questions about large scale image processing, and AI and machine learning apps. Is it your intent to build that capability in-house, or do you see that as a channel partner or strategic ally that might deliver that dimension? And so that's both a business and a technical question.
So whether it will be a partnership or we cultivate our own resources, that's something we need to work on. We have not yet decided or even looked at technical partnership today, but that's something we'll have to sort of work on in the next 2 months. But to answer your questions, I will accept the best path. I mean, if we get a credible partner, there is no reason not to partner with them. If I find a good outlet for getting it developed on an outsourcing basis, that's the path we will take. And if we find a good person around this area, a lot of brilliant people in the Washington DC metro area, I'm pretty sure if we go look around for one, we will find one. I will take the best path. I mean, we are not close to any avenue for talent.
Okay.
Partners.
So what's your thought, Raj, from a business perspective on applying AI and machine learning to enhancing OCR outputs and getting to trustworthy, actionable data ultimately?
So, I think there is only so much you can do. I think we're going to raise a lot of money and all that is good, but even then, we really need to kind of focus on a few core things. And I think we kind of, both Sirish and I know that doing AI, machine learning on our own would be a pretty tall task for us to handle, given the amount of money we are raising and what we want to accomplish with that money. So our bias, I think, is going to be towards partnerships, right, when it comes to AI, machine learning. So even if we, for example, try and do something on our own, I think it'll take time, it'll be expensive. We would rather, I think the bias is going to be to partner with someone. And even the data that the users are aggregating on their phones eventually will be subjected to AI and ML. But that's not something that we think we need to do. There are already other companies that would be way, way ahead of us. So, we would partner with them in order to, make this data useful for research and for precision medicine. So we want to really facilitate the aggregation of data and then make that data available, whether it's in a data lake, via blockchain, incentivizing the users to aggregate their records, to make them available, get users to think of the data as digital assets that they can monetize, right? So that's what we want to focus on. And then, we want to partner with people who are going to use this data, from a AI and ML standpoint.
So looking at roadmap, partnership-based approach to AI and machine learning for the digital images that you would have under your platforms, although self-sovereign data. Ahead of that, users could be incented to manually abstract data that exists in visual images into a structured data set. And I'm curious if that's something that you all have considered as a viable Omcoin generating task. Boy, I'm thinking about all the abstraction that we have to do in our real world healthcare life today. And I'm curious, I could see that being if we could create an incentive structure where patients would do their own abstraction, granted, eventually an AI is going to handle that. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's. I mean, we had not thought of that, but that's an excellent point. Where if there is a way for somehow either people are spending Omcoins for OCR and then either doing it manually or in some kind of an automated fashion, and either they are spending Omcoins or they are getting Omcoins for doing that. That's perfect. I mean, all really we want to see is Omcoin getting used in this ecosystem, and it could be for. I mean, you can extend that, and for example, yes, I make my data available for research, and I get paid Omcoins. But then I might turn around and actually use those Omcoins to buy precision medicine from a pharmaceutical company, right? So
Yeah.
and so that's again, it's all sort of makes this whole Omcoin liquid and facilitates the transactions.
So to the extent it could facilitate transactions, to the extent you're successful establishing partnership agreements with health services organizations that will accept Omcoin, which is no tall order, but certainly a reasonable objective. I could see this making a lot of sense, especially as you start the virtuous cycle that you spoke to.
Right.
A key question in my mind, and in the regulators as well, is and you mentioned liquidity a moment ago. How are you intending, or are you intending to enable trade and conversion from Omcoin, say, to Ether or Bitcoin, or back and forth? Maybe Suresh, you could take that question first. Have you enabled, or are you envisioning facilitating that at a technology level or not? Start there.
Yeah, of course. So our token will be what is called an ERC20 compliant token. It will be listed on exchanges, and it will be freely convertible into other cryptocurrencies, crypto tokens, and fiat currencies, whatever facilities. So that that path is the usual crypto exchange path, and we'll participate in that.
But will you do anything in your app itself to?
So our app will have an ERC20 compliant.
About it, for example, if somebody knows how to go to an exchange and trade cryptos, that's one thing. But talking about, your mom, Raj, right? Will your mom, who's using your app, and she better, right? Will she have any awareness or any facilitation of that, or are you going to stick strictly to your healthcare use cases within your app?
No, so yeah, that's a very good question, insight. So yes, our app will have inbuilt ERC20 wallet, which will store health token, Omcoins by default. So by default, you get a wallet which you may not be aware of. It's embedded in the app itself. If you are savvy, if you are smart about cryptocurrencies, yeah, sure, go ahead.
I'm saying it's not a separate app. It's going to be embedded within HealthWizz, the app.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So you can always see if you keep all your Omcoins within that wallet, you will see the balance reflected on the on the first your landing page itself. So you know how much Omcoins you own. If you are savvy and smart and know about your cryptocurrencies, you can always transfer those tokens to another wallet and store them there and spend it from there. But yeah, we will have a default wallet which will be usable, and which any
so then
any transactions you do.
Well, I just so indirectly, that connecting the dots, that means that even ahead of Omcoin specific transactions or partnerships with health services, there's a arm's length capability to convert to a fungible cryptocurrency and engage that way. So it's not essentially if there were a health service provider accepting Bitcoin, which I know is a wild idea, but if there were ahead of a partnership with you, they could transact that way, and your embedded wallet would hypothetically facilitate such a thing.
Exactly. So the user, an average user which has no which doesn't have technical or expertise in exchanging cryptocurrencies, will basically see services which are offered through a platform on their app, and they will participate in that activity, sort of very easily and transparently. They will see either their balances in their default wallet go down or go up, depending on whether they are earning home coins or spending home coins. So they will basically see it as an account, as a normal sort of bank account. But of course, we will make it clear that it's a currency, it's exchangeable. We provide, ways and tools to transfer it to different wallets. Those are, usual functions of a wallet anyway, and we will sort of expose them in our app also.
Raj, did you want to comment on that? It looked like you wanted to jump in there.
No, I think exactly as Sirish said, we'll have a wallet. It's going to be this ERC-20 compliant wallet. It's a standard, sort of wallet that you can have. And once you have your coins in that, you have the flexibility of, like Sirish said, increasing, decreasing your balance of Omcoins, and you can certainly go to an exchange and convert it into dollars or Bitcoin or Ether as well. And we'll facilitate all that through the wallet that's in the app, so it's relatively easy for anyone to use it, including my mom. Yeah,
absolutely, and my mom. I'm talking to my mom about this stuff. It's the conversations are so entertaining. So I have one more question for you two before we go to our next poll question. So I think, and I'm sure you considered this deeply, that one of the most thrilling incentive structures that is going to be possible in your model is by economically incentivizing creating some of the most complete, comprehensive, longitudinal, and accurate combined sets of health data that could ever come together. So right now, let's say there was a piece of software, hypothetically, maybe it's 20 years ago and it's Microsoft Health Vault, right? Where here's a place where you can pull all your health records together, go ahead and do the work. And the big question is why? Why bother? Why would you do that? It's not useful. There's no specific incentive. But in your model, we're talking about giving people a motivation where they're looking to, hey, maybe I'm going to start using a wearable because now I can plug it in here and I have an economic incentive because people care about that data. And maybe I didn't get all my preventative services done, but maybe I'm going to do that so that my data set now can check certain boxes. So my question for you is, clearly records with depth and breadth, completeness and quality ought to be worth more than lightweight records with, that don't, for example, pull down 23andMe genomics data with a wearable and 20 years of longitudinal EHR data, which would be a gold mine, right? So how do you assign relative value in Omcoin, or what sort of methodology or thought process are you thinking about in terms of specific differences in depth, comprehensiveness, duration, etc., in these PHRs? Raj, will you take that first?
I can go first. So I think we want the marketplace to dictate that, right? So we don't want to assign economic value to somebody's, digital asset, which is health records. But we want the market forces of supply and demand essentially dictate what that data is worth. So for example, if Pfizer is doing some kind of a clinical study and determines that they need all these medical records, including clinical data, wearables data, and genomic data from males between the age of 50 and 55 who have type 2 diabetes, and for that they're willing to pay $2,500 because that's what is worth to them. Then we just want Pfizer to essentially say, okay, $2,500 means this number of Omcoins. That's what we are willing to to give to participants. The participants look at that and make a decision whether they want to participate in that study with their data or not. So again, it's really a supply and demand thing, and really the market sort of dictates the price of your digital asset, which is your health record.
So just reacting to that for a moment to play devil's advocate. So if you take the automotive industry as a divergent example, you have the manufacturer's suggested retail price and whoever pays MSRP for their cars. I don't know, but hypothetically, there's this imaginary suggestion on behalf of the manufacturer that, you know, we think the car is worth this. And I'm thinking that if you're looking to, that perhaps there's a role for a suggestion on behalf of the buyer, of the buy side, to say something like, well, we've got X number of records that meet criteria Y. And a challenge there is, if you don't have access to this data, do you have access to the metadata such that you can give those kinds of analytics to potential buyers in order to transact or to make a market?
Yeah, so we don't believe that we would have, and we don't want to have access to metadata. And quite honestly, we actually don't want to be in that business because I think there's sort of a fine line between suggestions and regulations. We don't want to be any kind of a regulatory body that, you know, determines prices on any given day. Nor do we want to be in the business of suggesting, you know, what price that digital asset should have, because there are going to be so many different combinations and permutations of these digital assets. So I know what you're saying about MSRP and maybe some suggestibility, but I think we want this to be a free market that is unregulated, right? We don't, you know, the whole concept of blockchain is, you know, decentralized, no governance. This is completely free market economy that we think should thrive on its own.
And amen to that. It's just the capitalist in me getting in the way, thinking about the value that you would have, but you'd have to have analytics and quantitative and descriptors, and to create the buy side value proposition. Like, they have to know, if you're Pfizer and you have to know what sort of what's the pool of candidates that meet your inclusion criteria that might be incented to in fact opt in.
But you can also sort of start thinking about auctions, right? So it's possible that Pfizer might come in and we would actually, Pfizer might run an auction and say, look, we are doing this study and this is the price, and we need 1,500 participants, and they don't get 1,500 participants, so maybe they raise the price and poll the people again and say, well, now we're going to pay 30% more because we need more participants than what we have. So it essentially becomes an auction that Pfizer is running.
So question, I'm going to launch the poll, and then while this poll is going, and audience, we're going to wait till we hit that 90% mark again. Suresh, will you speak to your sort of the technologist perspective of how much information you're going to have about your, if you don't have metadata about the records that are stored, what data are you going to have about your users, or anything, or any metadata that you will be able to, publish, describe, say in the press, or make available to potential buyers of that data?
So, as Raj said, the decision to disclose your identity or not to disclose, again, rests with the user. And as a platform, we can give you broad statistics. We can tell you how many users we have, have downloaded our app, maybe how many use, what's the volume of data on an average we are seeing being stored or transacted. What are the various methods by which people are aggregating their data, that they are scanning paper records or pulling data from their web portals. So broad statistics like that, which can be useful for data seekers and data buyers to base their decisions on. We can, of course, give very fine-grained user level data. I think is the decision of the user to either identify or not identify, and be paid for that decision accordingly.
But the key there, and by the way, we're at 75% voted, so let's get a few more answers in if we could. Thanks, audience. So a key thing, though, was self-sovereign data and the core principle of incentives for the holders of the data to sell their data for research purposes. I know that's only one use case that we're talking about here. But if a patient self-selects, I'm sorry, I'm autopilot on the word patient. If a consumer self-selects to, and they're saying, I want to bring in as much money as I can bring in, as much Omcoin as I can bring in for the data that I have under your administration, can you make it possible for them to expose more details about the data, not the actual data, but the data's structure and nature and depth and so on? Is that something that you can or intend to facilitate through your app if the patient indicates, the consumer indicates that they wish to do so?
So if I understand the question correctly, you want to know whether the patient can discover a patient can easily know what type and what category of data they have on the store.
Well, no, that they could choose through their app to make that data about their data available to potential interested parties, whomever they may be.
All right. So the way a buy campaign would work, at a technical level, is that the buyer will sort of specify a certain criteria of what data they're looking for, and our app will sort of filter patients' database through that preference filter and suggest a number of records that are applicable to that campaign.
Okay, so in that case, you do have access to, you will be using the metadata in order to run the buy campaigns.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
So it's very user. I mean, we intend to make it really user friendly for a participant to participate in a study, where the tools will be suggesting, this is the type of data the buyer is looking for, and here is the data set that we think matches yours. The user, depending on their expertise, can either add or subtract from the data set and then make it available to the buyer.
Okay, that's super helpful, Suresh. Thank you. Raj, what do you think of these results? Is this what you expected?
From my perspective, I would actually sell my identified data for more money. So I'm in that 20% if I were to answer this question. But it's a very interesting response.
Yeah. So for anybody who might not be looking at their screen at this moment, we've got 20% of the audience, like Raj, saying that absolutely I'll sell my health data for more money if it's identified. And then you've got the majority, 60%, a strong majority, indicated that their choice would be to sell their de-identified data for less money, and then back to that 20% level who says, no way, never, I'm not going to sell my medical records for any purpose, or for research purposes was the key question. So that actually wasn't what I expected to see. So that's really interesting. Thank you, audience. And we got 94% of the audience to answer that one. So appreciate it, everybody. So we're getting close to the where we're going to open it up for audience Q&A. We're going to have a half an hour of that. I got one last question about the token generating event and its associated pre-sale and ultimate remaining sale. I appreciated all the financial metrics you provided, very clear. What sort of team did you put together in order to facilitate this transaction? You mentioned a lawyer. That was one. Is there a market maker, broker, promoter? What are you doing to advertise? Can you speak to that and give us some broad strokes? Because we're going to have a lot of questions on those topics, I know. So let's try to hit some of those high points.
Sure. So so obviously there is an internal team, and then there is an external, partners or service providers who we are working with. So internally, obviously our technical lead is Siddhesh, and we also have a marketing person, and Dr. Desai, who couldn't join us, is obviously handling some of the healthcare related things that come up. So the marketing person is essentially kind of handling the site where we announce the token sale, is handling the pre-sale, the qualification, and all that. But let me sort of tell you what we are doing with some of the external folks. So clearly we are working with a law firm. The law firm has a lot of experience in doing token sales, and they have a lot of experience dealing with the Security and Exchange Commission. So
I'm sure they would totally love it if you would plug them really quickly.
Sure. We are working.
What firm did you select?
Yeah, we are working with Cooley, and they are very, very well known in the area. So I'm sure the audience knows them really well. But they seem to have grown this practice that just focuses on cryptocurrencies and SEC rules that deal with token sales. So they definitely helped us put the structure together. For example, during pre-sale, we are raising money through this process called Reg D, 506 Reg D, which is we are soliciting investment from accredited investors, and there are definitions of accredited investors: net worth of $1 million, household income of $300,000 for the last 2 years. Now, this is sort of an open, on the website, people can come in and sign up for being an investor, as long as they have $25,000 to invest, and then we need to make sure that they are accredited. So we send them to a website, from Early IQ, that we don't see what these investors put in, but they essentially give their tax information and other information and get qualified as an accredited investor. We get their certification that they are accredited, and then we give them the rest of the documents to invest in HealthWizz. The rest of the documents are things like private placement memorandum and SAFT. So SAFT is sort of a derivative of SAFE, the simple agreement for future future equity is now called simple agreement for future token. So that's called SAFT. So essentially, you can look at it as a promissory note that we are giving to pre-sale investors, with the promise that their investment will be converted into tokens at the time of the public sale at a discount, and we are giving 20% discount to the price, whatever the price is at the time of public token sale. So all these documents had to be put in place. We had to work with Early IQ to set up a landing page so that if somebody comes in, they can go to Early IQ's landing site, get certified as an accredited investor. And then we are also supposed to do some other things like KYC, know your customer, AML, anti-money laundering verification, and OFAC verification, Office of Foreign Asset Control. There are lists and directories of countries and people that you can do business with. Because remember, this is all, this is all online. You don't know who is coming in as an investor. So if somebody from Iran comes in and wants to invest money, and if Iran is on the country that U.S. has imposed sanctions on, then you cannot take money from that investor. Right. And so you need to.
So you all have taken what I would describe as the and I am delighted to hear that this is the approach that you're taking, because it deconstructs so many of the concerns about the vast majority of coin offerings that are going on today. So from a jurisdiction perspective, you are launching this under American law, under the Jobs Act and Reg D, and so you are taking absolutely the most conservative position you possibly could legally.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is not inexpensive, by the way, to do all these things, all these verifications. It's free. It's an investment that you have to make. But yeah, you're right. It's a very conservative approach. We don't want to be associated with any scams or any pump and dump schemes that might be out there. This is a solid business. We have a solid business case. We have experience, 20, 30 years of experience in building companies, right? And we just don't want to be associated with anything less. So we are working with a PR firm, and then let me see if for the token launch itself, and we haven't made our final decision yet. We'll make it on Friday, but we are looking at 2 or 3 different companies that offer platforms for launching your token on the day of the public token sale. And they have they are the ones who essentially write contracts, smart contracts. They audit the contracts. They set up wallets in order to receive the investments from the sale of the public sale of the token on the day of the public sale. And so that's another vendor that we are talking to for doing the token platform. And and so
commitment is going to be made soon, not made yet. You're evaluating different options.
Right. We have 30, 45 days to get that up and running, but that's right now. The pre-sale investors we think are going to be in the vicinity of 80 to 100 pre-sale investors, and so those are things that can be handled manually, one-on-one. Obviously, people are going to need a lot of information, which we will give, besides what is on the website. But for the public sale, it could be anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 different investors coming in. There is no minimum. The minimum is like $100. So you could have a bunch of investors coming in, and that requires automation and a platform and a wallet that is secure, audited, and all of that. So that's what we are working on now.
So it's so interesting. Let's say we were to hypothetically go back in time 2 years, and we were talking about fundraising for a crowdsourced Jobs Act style fundraising. You would have had to assemble a similar team, and you would have incurred all the same legal expenses. So it's really, but not necessarily. You would have had placement fees through an investment bank, or you would have had a dilutive event with a VC or private equity or what have you. So it's so interesting what's possible for you now as the entrepreneur. You've still done everything in the most exactly to the T, precisely conservative way that you could, assembled the same team, but you are totally non-diluted on the equity side as a result of your token generating event, which is an extraordinary change. Today.
To put a little bit of color on that, it's what is fascinating about this is that we have HealthWizz Inc. and it has its own equity structure. That's intact. Nothing changes on that. We are issuing a token. That's what people are buying, right? And for investors, it's actually a much better deal or very interesting deal in the sense that no other in the past, like you said 2 years back, if you were a venture investor or even if you were a crowd investor, there was no liquidity for a very, very long time. Now with a token, you can potentially come in as an investor, and then as soon as the token gets listed on an exchange, you can potentially exchange it for dollars. So there is the liquidity is very, very quick, and that is what I think is very attractive for a lot of investors. You don't have to wait 5-7 years as a venture capitalist to see the light of day. The liquidity in this is pretty instantaneous, less than a few months.
an extraordinary characteristic, completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
I mean, in history of entrepreneurship, and yeah, absolutely. Suresh, anything you'd like to comment on that while we're running our third poll? Audience, go.
Yeah, I mean, the only comment I would have is that I think it's important to go with a token partner. I mean, we did sort of dabble around of doing it on our own, but the risks that involved and some stories that we heard of there, people were sort of robbed of their or directed to fraudulent sites and people lost their money. We quickly decided that we need a partner, a token launch partner, and there are pretty good competent companies out there who have done it, and have experience in it, and I think it's worth the money to get to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, it's an extraordinary thing that your cap table is not changing a bit, and you're able to do what you're doing, and it's commendations for taking that conservative approach. It really bodes well for the stability of your offering, as well as the professionalism and the backgrounds of the specific founders, Dr. Desai, Suresh, and Raj.
So
you all have,
yeah, I think we're 3 old timers dabbling around in a very new playground, right? So we've taken the experience of a past into a very, very novel and challenging field.
Yep. Can we get a few more votes in on this poll? So the question running is, would you participate in health-related challenges with your coworkers and family to promote a healthier lifestyle? And we're giving you options of coworkers and family, only coworkers, only family, or no way, no how, it's not happening. A few more answers? All right, let's share what we've got here. Oh, see, this is it's so interesting. Yeah. Not a single person said yes, only coworkers. 0. We've got 67% willing to do both, 0 willing to do coworkers only, 17% each for only family or no way, no how. Very interesting. Very interesting. Raj, thoughts on that poll?
No, this always amazes me how, you think that this is what people would want, but, you always are proven wrong.
Yeah, it's market research just knows no ends to its value, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's, we have one more poll to come, and we'll do that in a few more minutes. Let's get into audience Q&A. So let's see. Okay, that's just a comment. Okay, here's a great question. We've got James Johnson. So James, I'm going to find you on the attendance list. Just a second, and I'm going to take you off of mute. 3, 2, 1. James, are you there? Are you able? So James' question is.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Must be a delay. Bottom line is, as a healthcare provider, and I think you may have addressed a little bit of this earlier, but as a healthcare service provider, once people start paying me with the Omcoins, how am I going to get value from those Omcoins? I mean, I'm not just going to, get other healthcare services, and I can't see a huge insurance company getting other healthcare services as well. These are transferable to just straight cash at some point, I take it, yes?
Yes. You should be able to go on an exchange and essentially take these Omcoins and convert them into either other cryptocurrencies or into dollars.
And as just a quick follow-up, as a regular Joe, not a healthcare provider, but somebody who would be mining the Omcoins? Could I just mine them and then flip them to Bitcoins or cash?
So,
Go ahead.
so you cannot really mine Ohm coins if you look at the strictest definition of mining, there is no mining of Ohm coins. So people are earning Ohm coins because they are trading their data and in return for Ohm coins. And certainly you can take those Ohm coins and convert them into other cryptocurrencies or dollars, just like any other healthcare provider would do. The mining is not part of what we are doing. So we have a fixed supply of Ohm coins, which is part of the smart contract that we will be issuing when we do our public token sale. That smart contract says that there is only going to be 1 billion Ohm coins in circulation. So you can't mine it and generate more Ohm coins. The supply is fixed. And there are 650 million in circulation on February 15th or March 1st, and so that's sort of the structure. But there is no mining of Ohm coins.
And Suresh, maybe you could comment a little bit on how the ERC-20 standard, in terms of tokens built on the Ethereum blockchain, and how just the connection between Ether being mined and how that runs everything versus this. Would you speak to that?
Right. So ERC-20 is a standard for Ethereum tokens. Now, what are tokens? In the strictest sense, tokens are nothing but pieces of bits which you create in a smart contract. So, as Raj said, we are issuing what is called a fixed supply token. Essentially, it means that we will have a smart contract in which there is a statement, and it's an immutable statement which says on March 1st, when the smart contract goes online, that now 1 billion of these bits are now available for circulation. And then as people come and put money into our smart contracts, we will sort of dole out these bits to individual addresses or Ethereum accounts, as they are called. And ERC-20 basically, when a token is ERC-20 compliant, it basically means the contract that we will launch will have a number of interfaces that the standard mandates that the ERC-20 token should have. So you should be able to look at how many what's the current supply, what is the total supply, a number of methods or transactions that you can do on a smart contract and figure out what is the state of the token is. Now, just to add to what Raj was saying, that there is no mining involved in tokens. You can have tokens which can be mined, but we are not one of those tokens. So a smart contract is just an interface. The implementation behind that interface can be varied. You can have fixed supply. You can have delayed supply, in the sense that you start with some little supply and then keep supplying at different points of time, or at epochs or at events that you determine in the contract. Or you can basically say, you will give the ability to users to actually mine, with proof of work or proof of stake, whatever proof you want to implement in your token. That can be done, but we are not the one who are doing it. We are doing a fixed supply, simple token contract.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh.
Right.
So, thank you, James, for your questions. Anything else, and we're going to put you back on mute?
No, thank you. I appreciate the thoughtful answers.
All right, thanks a lot. Putting you back on mute. Okay, so our next questions will come from Alberto. Alberto has a number of detailed questions, and they're questions both from the entrepreneurial perspective and the technical perspective. So Alberto, I'm looking for you on the list. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, Alberto, are you
Hello.
there?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. So your first question was for Raj about the kind of engagement that he's had with healthcare, with hospitals, insurance companies. Would you like to elaborate on your question?
Yeah, basically, I'm curious about. I mean, So in the entrepreneurial side, they always talk about who is your customer, and if you really talk about customers. So how many people they interview on the side of, for example, simple customers that they are going to use the app, and also doctors or hospitals, how many of them they interview, and if they also interview people from the insurance, and how were the approach, and also the comments about this application.
All right, Raj.
Yes. So, we actually did a pilot earlier in the year, and it had nothing to do with blockchain at the time. It was more, we have within the app, we have this concept of My Health Index, which essentially is an index for an individual's mental and physical well-being. And at that time, we had a small folder called medical records. And we put it there because we wanted to see if users would even bother going to that folder, right? So we ran this pilot, and it wasn't a huge pilot, but there were about 50 participants, and they all of them, except maybe one or two, went to the medical records folder. So they did their thing with My Health Index. They played with that. We got a lot of good feedback. There were some usability things that they suggested we change, which we did. One of the big things was that they were very concerned about their data being seen by their employer. We were running this pilot through an employer, and in fact, the participation was low, only 50 out of 7,000, 8,000 employees, and the reason was they just didn't trust their employer. So that was a lot of feedback that we got from these pilot users. Each one of them, except one or two, went to medical records folder, and they were not, it was a very limited functionality. They were not able to do a whole lot at the time. This was earlier in the year. We didn't have a lot of functionality, and we got a lot of good feedback about what that medical records folder should have, and how important it was for each one of these participants to use that medical records folder as a way to aggregate their records from different sources. So I think that and then of course sort of unscientific, but we've talked to a lot of people. It seems even if there was no incentive, people would still be very, very interested in getting hold of their medical records and organizing them. In fact, people have told us that I can quickly find any music or video on my phone. It takes me less than half a second to do it, and I want my medical records to be organized exactly that way, so that it can show up as last viewed, or according to date, or according to the provider or hospital. So again, we build this based on all that feedback. Now, so this is our end users who are actually going to be using the app, and we think that we have listened to them, we have incorporated a lot of the feedback that we got. But the other set of, on the other side, we have people who are going to be interested in buying the data. So we've talked to hospitals. In fact, we are working with a hospital now. Hospitals have a big problem. I'm sure Heather knows about this as well. They, from CEO downwards, everybody is very, very focused on reducing readmission rates. So when somebody gets discharged, if they get readmitted within 30 days, big problem, bonuses get affected, including CEO's bonus. So everybody's very, focused on reducing readmission rates. And how do you do that? Well, some of the things that we are doing with this hospital in North Carolina is, well, can we incentivize these, people who are discharged with chronic conditions to maybe report their blood pressure and weight every day, and then, reward them for it with Omcoins and lower our readmission rates. Right now, they actually send out paramedics every other day to these patients' homes to take blood pressure measurements and weight measurements, and so that they don't get readmitted to the hospital. So we are working with the hospital. We are also working with an EHR company to work with them using some of the standard interfaces that we talked about, fast health, interoperability resources. And finally, I've talked to a number of pharmaceutical companies. In fact, last week we were on a call with a professor at UCSF, University of California at San Francisco, who's doing research for breast cancer and would like to use our system to poll participants and get their data to do medical research. We also talked to some other research organizations who would like to do similar things. So again, right now we don't have a system that is up and running for these people, but we're talking to them and essentially designing it to their needs. So again, we need to, we obviously need to take care of the end users, but we also need to make sure that the buy side, which is the pharmaceutical companies and research organizations, are going to be, interested in coming to this system to buy data. So that's the scope of work we have done to date.
Alberto, so real quick, before you ask your second question, and it has to do with the protection of data once uploaded into your PHR, I'm going to launch our last poll and let that run. This has to do with your preferences and what you would do as a consumer around wellness activities. So I'm going to let that go. Alberto, so you had a second question, this one directed at Suresh.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, I was talking with so many people about these medical records also on using blockchain. My question for Suresh, if I can pronounce well the name, is about the cybersecurity. So since the data itself is going to be off blockchain, so how secure is going to be that data? So it's going to rely on the normal security that the user can provide, like the Google Drive or Microsoft Drive or the iCloud on the cell phone, or is going to be some procedures itself in this app?
Thank you. Suresh?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So yeah, we will use the smartphones security apparatus and the modern both Android and iOS provide a lot of tooling to secure your data at rest, right, including complete encryption of your data if you so desire. Our plan is to sort of guide the user and let them make their choice. If they're storing the data on the phone itself and they're comfortable, comfortable with it, then it can be, for performance purposes, it can be, unencrypted. But if they want, they can choose an option and encrypt it. The same is for using a public cloud. Both Google and iCloud, they guarantee the privacy as well as secrecy of the data, security of their data while it is on the, on your private drive. So only you and the people you share your files or objects with can see that file. They guarantee that separation. If you are comfortable with that guarantee, then your data can live as it is on these clouds. But if you so desire, we can encrypt it with your identity key, and of course it will take a performance hit at that point of time. You might have slightly slower response in terms of extracting or searching your data, but we intend to leave that, at least at this point of time. That's a design direction we are trying to go, where the level of security that you're comfortable with be left with you. Again, of course, when you store your data on your smartphone, we will provide you again through either normal channels, or for a fee you can use our space to back up your data, which is sort of different from online or usable database. So the backing of data, in case you are storing it on your cloud, again, is your choice. You can use the Android or iOS channels to do that, or we can set up or we will be setting up a channel for a fee, we can assure you the privacies.
And this may be self-evident, but just adding to that, the data that we're talking about is not protected health information under HIPAA. This is not, you're not a HIPAA covered entity. Patients in using it are just
right.
to be
so because
clear.
we are not taking custody of your data. We are at no point in time does our, do we as a, as an organization actually look or analyze your data? Your data is under your custody, in your supervision. In that sense, as an owner of your data, and since an individual is not a covered entity in HIPAA, those regulations actually don't apply to you as a user. Only in the case where you opt of using our storage as, as your data store, which we intend to provide for a fee, because we'll be expending some resources on it. Even there, because we are just providing storage and will not actually look or analyze your data, but for being conservative, I think we'll use HIPAA compliant platforms in that case. But yeah, in normal case, when you're storing your data on your private cloud or in a smartphone, HIPAA doesn't apply.
All right, thank you, Suresh, and thank you, Alberto, for the great questions.
Welcome.
All right, I'm going to put you back on mute. All right, so we're slightly over our time. I'm going to share the results of our last poll, and then we'll open it to just one or two more questions, and I think we're going to have you back a while down the road, because there's so many questions coming up, and it's such an interesting scenario that you've put together. So this corroborates what you were describing, Raj, where 73% of the respondents are willing to participate in a wellness program if it's unrelated to their employer. Only 9% say they'd like it through their employer, and 18% say no way, no how. I'm not interested in wellness programs. Super interesting. So, okay, so let's take, so I mentioned Viraf earlier because I was thinking about AI and OCR and machine learning. Viraf, I'm going to take you off of, if you're still on, we might have, did we lose him? Nope, we didn't lose him. Viraf, taking you off of mute in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so,
Hi, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I guess my question was really regarding with the usage of data. Once people have access to the data, how do you protect, given that there's no DRM and typically the data will be used not just for viewing but for algorithms, I'm assuming that's why Pfizer and all is buying the data. How do you protect it from multiple uses, and how you reimburse, track it and reimburse the patient, customer, whatever the term?
That's a great question, Viraf. Thank you. Raj or Suresh, who would like to take that first?
Suresh, I think you have taught me a lot on this, so might as well go.
So again, I was not able to hear the question properly, but yeah, if you want to.
I'll paraphrase. So you have buy-side transactions that are for a discrete purpose at a discrete time for a certain usage by a certain party. Viraf's question is, how do you prevent then subsequent double, triple, multiple uses that weren't authorized?
So
right, Viraf?
that's
do I have it right?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a problem that that's called how do you make people forget data, right? Essentially, that's the problem statement. Once you have given or disclosed the data to a party, how do you make sure that they forget it after they have used it? And I think there's no technical protection for that problem. The only protection is legal, and when you release your data, there are you basically enter into a contract where you say that the data that you're providing will be used only for the purpose that the contract is specifying, right? Once the data is, if it's de-identified data, once it has gone to the buyer, and let's say consider a scenario where the data is being pushed into a data lake. The smart contract can verify that the data lake closes after some time, right, after the campaign duration ends. But there is no guarantee in the sense that that data has not been copied somewhere else and cannot be reused. Your only protections in that cases are legal.
Once it's off chain, I mean it's off chain. But what about the double spend problem and intrinsic capabilities of distributed ledger technologies. Thoughts on that?
So we are using the blockchain or the smart contract capability for the value exchange. Right? That's our use case where the contracts make sure that the value that you have agreed to get goes into your wallet before the data is presented to the buyer in a usable form, right?
What about
that's the guarantee?
Expiration, at least?
Yeah, so the access keys will make sure that you specify the frequency and the access time for your data. So you can say, I'm releasing this data for you within. You can access it for the next 24 hours once or twice. You can make 2 attempts at getting the data. So that sort of granular permissions can be encoded in the key. But again, the question was, once the data has changed hands, right? Once the data has been disclosed to the user, essentially there is no technology. I mean, there are DRM methods, but even then, once you will, the user will see the data at any given point for analysis, right? And that opportunity to copy the data cannot be discounted, through any technology, I think. If there are, I'm a student, I'm happy to learn and probably imply them, but you rely on the reputation of the buying party. I mean, we think we'll partner with parties which are, which have a reputation to protect, and they are aware of the penalties and fines that can be levied in case they break this contract that a user and that the buyer and seller enter into. So as I said, technically you can only do that much. You can only time bound the data access. You can make sure that the data change hands after in a transactional manner. But really, once the product is in the hands of the buyer, it's a fungible product, right? You can copy it, and from there is no production, technically, in a real sense.
Thank you, Suresh. Bharath, do you have any follow-on questions or reactions to?
No, that was pretty much what, because with DRM, it wouldn't be feasible because I assume the data is used for analytics, and so that's just not going to work. All right, thank you.
Right.
All right, taking you back off of mute, Bharath. Thanks so much. Well, wait, what? A little bit of a glitch there. Okay. And DRM is Digital Rights Management, for anyone not familiar with that acronym. Okay, so we are at 10 minutes over. Raj and Suresh, would you like to each make some quick closing remarks?
So, I think, this is something that obviously hasn't been done before, but we see a huge market potential. I think one thing that a lot of us are probably not aware of is that there's a huge market out there today where data brokers are selling our data. So when you go into a doctor's office and sign those consent forms, after that, you essentially don't know where your data is going, but our data is being sold today. And people say it is de-identified, but as you know, with today's technology, you can pretty much identify anything that is de-identified just, with a few little, with some computing resources, you can do that. So that's a data broker industry. We think it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are a couple of big players in there. We estimate that's a $3.5–4 billion industry. Our data is being sold and we don't get anything out of it, and that's what we want to change, right? That if my data is being sold, I want to be compensated for it, and there is no mechanism today that allows that. But we think that with blockchain, all the regulations, in terms of what patient rights to their data, and we think that we have a sort of a unique opportunity to make that happen.
Suresh?
Yeah, so I as a technologist or as a technical person, I think I'm really amazed and excited at the innovations and opportunities that are that lies ahead in this intersection of healthcare and blockchain. I think these are very exciting and very innovative times for people like us, like dabble in in new and exciting things. I think we are just at the beginning. What we have envisioned and what we have thought of is just the beginning of a very fulfilling and rewarding story for for people who have been looking for these tools for quite some time. So I saw the survey results and some of the not so encouraging results might be because of the lack of these tools. Really speaking, that's what I believe. People have access to tools where you can organize and collect your data and see it as an asset. Once these tools are in place, once people get to know these tools, I think some of the skepticism might go away. People will participate more in this in surveys and wellness programs. Once it becomes usable and user friendly, I believe the participation and the numbers that we have seen will improve, and people will be more receptive to participation and sharing their health record for research and other purposes.
Well, it's also important to remember this is definitely not a representative sample. Our attendees this evening are all healthcare wonks and technologists and people who are definitely not representative of the population at large. So it's interesting, but we have to balance it. So Raj and Suresh, we certainly, all of us that are part of this group, wish you tremendous success with your pre-sale, and thank you for taking the time to share with all of us your experience and its mechanics. I feel like we're just able to scratch the surface and we are over time. So thank you so much. And just a couple of quick points. You can find the white paper was available for download through here, but also through the HealthWizz website. And there's some great explainer videos and wonderful content that HealthWizz has pulled together for your review. And with that, our next series of events, we'll have another one in December, 2 more in January, all with really exciting guest speakers and all very different in their content and direction, but all at the intersection of blockchain technology and healthcare. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks
All
for
right.
the opportunity.
You're very welcome. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.